This occurred in the middle of September in 2014, when I was 10 years old, just the beginning of 5th grade. The layout of where this happened. You would walk across the streets, take like a minute or two to walk into their driveway, go down the hill, and then take a right, and about 10 feet from the back of the house was the trampoline. Looking out from the trampoline with the house behind you, to the right was a white picket fence with houses to the right of that, and on the left was dense trees that slanted into the middle of the property about 200 yards. When I was a kid, I would go to my neighbour's house to go jump on their trampoline in the backyard. I jumped on it so much that I didn't have to ask any more because I was there 4 times a week, every week, for 2 years. One Saturday night with my friend and I, we'll call him Jay, decided to go jump on the trampoline at about 5:30 p.m. We crossed the street, walked across the road, went back their hilly backyard, and then got on it. Jay and I were jumping and doing tricks for a little bit, having fun, but felt uneasy and uncomfortable the whole time. Something just felt off. At about 5:45ish or 6 p.m, the sun was just starting to set. The sun was tapping the horizon, looking actually very pretty, but we were in the shadows of the house. Jay was having fun, but then mid-jump, froze, face white as a ghost. He slowly and shakily pointed his finger towards the dense trees and said scaredly, "What the hell is that?" I'm already crapping myself, but slowly turned around. In the distance, about 150 yards away, in the shade of the trees was this probably around 9-foot, super skinny, bony thing that was white with a grey tinge to it. Its head was oval shaped like a football, had foot-long finger claws, 6 to 7 inch fangs in its mouth, and bright white piercing eyes. It was half hidden behind a tree with its hand around it, just staring at us angrily. Jay and I just stared at it horrified and in disbelief for probably 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. It was like we were in a trance and couldn't move either out of fear or because of it. The thing looked like it was going to run at us. I could just feel it. I told Jay that we had to leave now or we would die. With all of my strength, I forced my little 10-year-old body to move and Jay was ahead of me. We jumped off of the trampoline and started running, but Jay tripped and I wasn't going to stop. As I was sprinting up the hill, I looked over my shoulder to see if Jay got up and I swear this thing was coming. So I ran even faster than I have ever run before back to my house. Jay entering right after me, scared to death. We never went back there. I lived there for another 2 years and never talked about it again. I told my parents about it, but they didn't believe me, which is understandable, because who's going to believe their 10-year-old about something like that? I haven't told anyone this story except my girlfriend because I literally blocked it out of my head, even when all the haunting stuff happened, until I was reading Reddit and remembered it a day or 2 ago. Ever since that day when I'm alone in the dark, not at home, I get this overwhelming feeling of being watched. Also, it kind of looks like Slenderman and a Skinwalker combined. Mr. Ballin on YouTube has a thumbnail that kind of looks like it, so if you look up the most believable alien encounter, the Skinwalker Ranch story on YouTube, and look at his thumbnail, imagine that and Slenderman combined. I've been living with my fiancé and his parents for a year now. Although if I'm honest, I think this has happened before, but I cannot remember for sure. The thing about me is my memory is shocking. I have flashes of things, but if it happened more than a week ago, then I cannot be sure if I've remembered it correctly. I'll try my best though, and I hope it makes sense. Anyway, on with my story. On one of my mornings off, my partner went off to work, and as I wanted a lie-in, I put in some earplugs. It can get noisy when the others get up, and I went back to sleep. On this day, they all went out early, leaving me home alone, but at the time, I wasn't aware of this. The window was open as I get really hot at night. I was in the dream sleep, whatever that is called, when all of a sudden, I'm woken by someone or something screaming my name right in my ear. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, but I say screaming, is that what it ended as? It repeated my name 2 or 3 times, getting louder each time. After the third time, I was genuinely scared awake, and although I would not open my eyes, I got the sense of someone standing over me breathing. I thought I could feel that anyway. When I eventually opened my eyes, there was no one there. I thought maybe my partner's brother, who also lives in the house, was playing a trick on me, as he knows I watch the ghost hunting programs and things, but when looking around the house, I was alone. I looked out the window, as that is where everyone goes to smoke in the back garden, but there was no one there and all the cars were gone. To this day, I'm not sure who was trying to wake me, but I know there was no one there. I know I was not dreaming as it woke me, and although I did not open my eyes, I was awake fully by the last time it called my name, which is what scared me the most. If anyone has any ideas on what this could mean or be, I'd appreciate it. I've not had any bad or good news, so I don't think it was a message from someone warning me of something to come. It was also a long time ago now, so not expecting anything either. I do believe the house to be haunted, as I have heard footsteps walking in the hallway when I'm in the bathroom and on my own. But as I've not seen or heard anything else, I don't think much of it. Okay, this happened back in September, and I finally got the nerve and enough clarity and reflection on it to start writing this post about a month ago. I keep writing and deleting and rewriting because the event itself was so difficult to put into words, but also because there are also so many other facets and surrounding events that seem to be involved. It shook me to the core in a way that very few events in my life have, and I honestly kept shaking too much to type for the first few attempts. Also, I keep getting really frustrated that my words are coming off like a fucking creepypasta. No offense to anyone who wants to write one. I just feel like the more I say, no, really, this happened, the less it sounds like reality and more like fiction. Which, ironically, writing the previous sentence probably skews things towards fiction as well. I don't know. Feel free to call it whatever you want. But I'm posting this because I honestly and truly could use some advice, or shared experience or suggestions on reading material that could help me figure out what the hell happened to me and what I saw. I'm also not too familiar with this group, but it seemed to be the most appropriate. If there's another one that might fit better for serious inquiry into the paranormal or unknown, please let me know. Thank you for reading this far. I have a horrible ability to ramble in an attempt to provide enough detail. It's my firm belief, through literal decades of self-run tests, that there is, in fact, another realm of existence beyond the physical, and that I, along with many others, have the ability to access those realms. When I was younger, I didn't think there was anything beyond, and I just had bad wiring and a broken brain. But I went out to prove that, and I couldn't. There was too much evidence to indicate that yes, I was ill. But there was also so much beyond ordinary reality that we don't normally perceive. I'm only going into this much detail to make a point that, in my honest opinion, there's mental illness and a spirit realm, and whenever I have an experience that seems supernatural, it's first and foremost treated as a delusion, until proven otherwise. So back in September, I saw a creature. It looked like a Wendigo, but nothing seemed evil or emaciated about it, which was confusing. Also, in the past year, 3 close friends have seen something similar within the local region, if not the same creature. They never told me any of this, but when I told them of my experience, they went white as a sheet and then told me what happened to them. But their experience was opposite of mine, in terms of the intent and impression of the creature, which is also confusing. Also, this was not a physical being. I want to be very clear about that. I was drawn into the astral plane or spirit realm, like the energetic framework that provides the support and structure for every object and living creature that is in ordinary reality. In my opinion, it's like the energy plane is the lumber that builds the underlying structure for a house. The wooden framing is always there supporting and forming the house that we see. And we know it's there. And it's really responsible for the structure that's see. But we never see the framing. Doesn't mean it's not there. You'd get called crazy for denying a home has unseen framing. But mention the same idea with another level of reality? Definitely nuts. Anyway, here's the experience. I was at work, and a strange sensation took hold of me. I felt my attention drawn towards the shed outside, and as I turned to look, I was pulled from my body into the astral realm. It wasn't a slip that I initiated, it was more like I was wearing a full body safety harness, and a cable suddenly pulled me from my body with tons of force. It was as if I was launched from my physical body. I've got decades of experience with astral travel, but none where I'm the one who wasn't initiating it. I didn't have time to worry or even think about what just happened. As the being, whom I believed initiated the entire experience, became apparent. I think he pulled me out there to evaluate me or inspect me. Or maybe it was just the same type of curiosity a human would have towards finding a June bug or grasshopper, because the power imbalance felt about that great, like a bug looking up at a human. Anyways, I had somehow passed through the wall and was now roughly 15 feet outside the house, and the being was walking between me and the shed. He walked toward me, and then turned and walked away to my left. While walking, he slowed, turned and looked at me. The strange thing is, I was mostly in ordinary reality, but looking towards him, it was as though the power within him tore a fucking hole through reality. It was like I was looking through a living porthole torn through the fabric of reality, a waving, undulating portal through the physical world and into the ethereal framework that holds up the illusion of matter and everyday reality. This portal through the veil was circular and ringed like liquid with fire without heat, and he seemed to generate the fuel with his flesh. Like his skin was radiating and sweating energy so powerful it tore a hole through reality. He too was cloaked in a cloud of orange and blue fire, but unlike ordinary fire, like fire and electricity had somehow created a wet, pulsing offspring through some forbidden union. He was massive, between 8 and 10 feet tall, extremely muscular, and of human form until the lower legs, which were much more similar to a deer or moose. The human portion of his body was, well, ripped, but like as muscular as possible while still maintaining ultimate dexterity and speed. Not some puffed up gym rat that's lost the ability to tie his shoes or scratch his back from bulk, but a perfect balance of strength, speed, fluid flexibility, and a terrifying grace of movement. I'm making this point because seeing his form and movement for a brief moment made it clear he was god of the hunt, a dealer of death and a master of destruction. And yet, he never seemed evil or malicious or dark. It wasn't a sense of ugly doom and hatred he exuded, but pure beauty. I know, believe me when I say it was extremely confusing to see that juxtaposition. Words seem pitiful tools to describe the experience, like trying to do brain surgery with a sledgehammer, but I'm trying here. But his head was the skull of a moose, maybe a deer or a horse. Pretty sure through research it was a moose, which we have here. But the antlers were more like a hybrid of an elk and maybe an Irish elk, absolutely massive. A much oversized skull with a simply physically impossible rack. The especially otherworldly part of his antlers wasn't their size though. It was that they started at the skull looking like ordinary, albeit way oversized antlers. But they transformed into the same energy slash fire slash electricity that he was engulfed in and flowed out like lightning into the corona surrounding him that formed the tear in the veil. Like they were helping generate and maintain the portal between our realms of that sacred and the profane. By the way, I'm in Wendigo country. The tribes from this area of the Algonquin speaking origin. Oh yeah, forgot to mention that. I'm right where that tale originates. More on that later. This moment is what still has me so shook up, even months later. He seemed mildly interested and slightly amused that I was looking at him, that I didn't look away in terror at the power that was before me. I'm really not trying to boast. It was more shock that I kept looking than bravery. However, I will say that through studies regarding shamanism and dealing with spirits in general, I've never forgotten that it's a crucial fact. You can't go into those situations and forget that you have to hold your ground. Even if you feel like an ant facing a steamroller, you stand strong and tall if you want to get us alive and sane. Never forget your power. The stronger the being, the stronger you have to stand. The best I can do to explain the experience is this. I felt sobbing with joy that whatever this thing was that was studying me had chosen to not obliterate me, to turn me to dust and ash with a single thought. I felt confused, but eternally grateful that there was something in my being that made him look at me with mild curiosity, that whatever was within me and had granted me grace instead of annihilation. Again, it was like being a bug, lost inside the house of someone who chooses to catch you with a cup and throw you outside, instead of crushing you and throwing you in the trash. He turned and walked away. The portal closed. I was thrown back into my body, and suddenly I was back inside and helping my co-worker install hardwood flooring. Yeah. So here's the thing. He looked like a Wendigo in the sense he was a man's form mostly, with a skull for a head with antlers, and the legs/feet were moosage. Earlier I described them in that more detail, but honestly, the whole thing lasted 10 seconds tops, and studying his feet wasn't top priority. Pretty sure they faded into hooves though. Full disclosure, a lot to take in, huh? But here's the rub. He was not emaciated. He was not malicious in any way. Opposite of that, in fact. And I felt blessed to be in his presence, not terrified for my life. Also, he wasn't a physical creature, but an ethereal one. So, what the fuck? Please, if anybody has any experiences or ideas or references, I'd really appreciate it, because I'm at a loss. Also, I didn't go looking for this guy, for the record. In fact, I had been thinking a little before they happened that it seems most stories of Wendigo are wildly inaccurate, and that it has recently become the new hit monster for Hollywood and the internet alike. And when actual folklore on it seems pretty different than from how it's being represented. Not to mention this variety of tribes with a variety of versions, then this fucking happens. Regarding my three friends, they've all seen a creature that more closely resembles the popular rendition of the Wendigo, and it was most definitely malicious. One of my friends is convinced it's after him, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. One friend's first thing he said to me when I described what I saw, "I'm so sorry, my dude. That thing has ruined my life. Nothing has been the same since I first saw it." And I should add, I don't think I've ever seen him scared like that. Former Marine who served in Afghanistan, who's also having a shit time recently and is passively suicidal and struggling with addictions. Yeah, and he got scared. I should mention there's been a lot of death in our area in the past 2 years, although not caused by whatever these creatures are. Car attacks, but mostly ODs. I've lost 2 brothers since 2020, and other friends. My Marine buddy lost 7 friends. 4 of them in the main group. Just him left. I'm so fucking sick of all the death and suffering and isolation and fear lately. It makes me wonder if these creatures are attached to it. I don't know, just a thought. Here's that note on my mental health. Just putting it all out there before someone suggests it was all psychosis. And hey, who knows? Maybe I'm extremely skeptical in nature. I think it's healthy. But I really, really doubt it, and here's why. Long story short, I started hallucinating/psychotic systems since I can remember. Been seeing shrinks and whatnot for my whole life. Diagnosed bipolar, PTSD. That shit didn't help the psychosis. Had to go through a dozen meds to get balanced. Been to grippy sock jail, rehab, etc. So am I crazy? Sure, that's a word for it. But here's the thing. I've hallucinated for 6 months non-stop. I know what that's like. And there's always a giveaway with the hallucination. You just have to use logic and hunt for it. Also, the chronic and extreme hallucinations were when I wasn't on medication, and often when I was strung out from trying to make it stop with heavy drug use, which works great for a few hours, and then it's worse, so you do more. Then it's better and, oh yeah, that's called addiction. When this experience happened, I was stable. I haven't had psychotic symptoms without due cause like extreme emotional distress, chronic insomnia, etc. And even then, they're mild. Tracers, halos, etc. Think tiny amounts of psychedelics. I'm putting out this info that can be used to discount my story because this story sounds obviously kind of insane. The fact wasn't lost on me, and I'll be the first to doubt my sanity. Having blind faith that I'm fine with my history is a recipe for disaster. So I'm including all my past history and diagnoses in an effort towards full transparency, but also to reach out to anyone who might be going through similar struggles with, am I crazy or is this spiritual? My desire to determine the existence of anything beyond the ordinary led me down some amazing paths. Shamanism, Wicca, entheogens, psychedelics, yoga, Buddhism, etc., and was the driving force behind my minor in religious studies for my BA. I decided when I was younger that I would have faith in nothing until I could prove it, and I would assume that there was nothing in the beyond until I could. No God, soul, etc. Nothing without evidence, derived through logic and obtained facts. I was in trying to prove to myself that there was nothing beyond what science provided, and that I was indeed just crazy, that I proved something more. So much more. I didn't go out seeking God. I wanted reassurance that I was just broken and that no one had a soul so that I could kill myself without guilt or fear of hell. So a few nights ago, she told me she was just in her room relaxing on her phone. She said at one point she heard my voice behind her very clearly say her name. Not a whisper, but very clear and direct. She said she could easily tell that it was my voice, but that was something about it was off. Something she couldn't point out, but she said something just felt different about it when she heard it. At the time, I was asleep in the living room. That was just the first experience. One day passed and nothing happened. The next day, it was my turn. I stayed up early into the morning on the phone with my girlfriend. The last message I sent was at 1:22 in the morning. So she went to sleep and I was sitting on the couch for a few minutes just listening to music. I walked to the bathroom to pee and I hear her. Her room is across from the bathroom and the hallway is kind of narrow. Through both of the doors, I hear her giggling and laughing. I thought she was watching something on her phone that she found funny, and it sounded exactly like her laugh. There's a small crack in her door, so I just kind of glanced as I walked past. I didn't stop walking, but saw the light of her phone as I passed by. The next morning, I woke up and she was on the couch, parallel to the one I slept on. After I woke up, I started talking to her and making conversation out of last night. I heard your goofy ass laughing last night, I said. She asked me when, to which I responded around 1:30 in the morning. She had gone to sleep at around 9 last night and hadn't woken up until well into the day. By this point, we were both thoroughly confused at these experiences. What creeps me out the most is that it was almost the same with her experience. Something about her laugh just seemed off, and the laughing I heard went on for a good 5 minutes or so. And she's a deep sleeper, so talking or laughing in her sleep is not a viable explanation. And if it were, it wouldn't explain what she heard 2 nights before, since we were in completely different rooms. I never believed in Ouija boards until I was in college. My freshman year, my roommate bought one and we all decided to play with it as a hoax. We planned this whole thing out and we scared him real bad. Next time we used it, we decided to actually try it and see if it would work. And it did. Too well. We lived in West Philly next to a cemetery and on land that used to be a mental asylum for indentured servants and slaves, as well as a farm where a lot of slaves died before abolition. Not to mention all the people who died to violence in West Philly over the years. We got a lot of interesting people at first. A doctor who died from typhoid fever, a slave who was whipped to death, a young man who shot in the 80s. We even able to find some of their graves in the cemetery exactly where they told us they'd be. It was like uncovering a key to the past, but then things started to get really bad. We got a child who refused to give us their name or tell us anything about their past. Instead, it kept asking us questions, and when we didn't answer, it would start to spell the answers out for us. Things that none of us would know about each other or what we never talked about. Stuff like childhood nicknames in foreign languages. Stuff like embarrassing moments. We would play for hours, so it had a lot of time to spell out whole paragraphs. And then it uncovered one of our friends, who wasn't even playing, secret. Some childhood trauma that she hadn't told anyone about. She started sobbing and immediately stormed out. We tried to say goodbye to the spirit, but it wouldn't let us. It was vehemently pushing the eye away from the goodbye. We finally hung up, for lack of a better word, and chucked on our friend who then told us the story. We were all dumbfounded. She never played again, but we were hooked. Unfortunately for us, every time we used it after that, we would get the same spirit. Eventually, we uncovered his name, Yubel, and he told us that he wasn't technically a real kid. He died during the pregnancy and killed his mother along with him. She never named him, so he picked his own name. He said we were his first and only friends and that he loved us and would find a way to be with us. We immediately were freaked out and put the board away for good, since we were convinced Yubel was a demon. Only, it wasn't for good. The board would magically appear around our dorm. It would be open and have the eye set to yes. We would hear some strange noises at night. Footsteps, croaking, rattling. Whenever we talked about anything in the room with the Ouija board, strange things would happen. My roommate had set up these glow-in-the-dark decals in his room. Our other friend said she liked them and that she wanted some. The same one who vowed never to play after it uncovered her secret. That night, she went to bed, and when she turned off the light, her ceiling was covered with glowing symbols. She called us over and we all saw it, but when we tried to take photos of it, it wouldn't show up on the camera. After we turned the lights back on, they had disappeared and never came back. We had enough, so we decided to play one last time and tell him to stop and leave us alone. He got angry and started saying a string of random numbers and letters. We googled them, convinced it meant something, and the only thing that came up was a radio station. We tuned in on our phone, and it was a religious radio channel, and the host said all the sinners who were listening would face eternal damnation. We were terrified, and then the eye rapidly started spelling out "see you soon," 3, 2, 1, goodbye. And as it did that, my friend's stuffed rabbit croaked as if it were a dead creature and flew off the shelf. We ripped him open to see if there was a voice box inside or something to explain it, and there was nothing. We threw the board into the closet and never touched it again for the next 2 years. 2 years later, I came across it again, realizing it must have accidentally ended up in my stuff after we moved out. And I decided to play with it to see what would happen this time, thinking that last time it was all an elaborate hoax my roommate had cooked up to get back at us for scaring him the first time. This time, it was me and a whole new group of friends and I. As soon as we asked the first question, it starts spelling out Yubel. I never let it finish. I immediately moved it to goodbye and told my friends we were done. I've tried the board several times since then, and every time I get Yubel, no matter who I'm with. People who have never even heard the original story. I'm done with these for life. Ever since playing with it the first time, I've attracted spirits like wildfire. No one can really know for sure if the rumours about death cycles are true, but I'm almost entirely convinced that they are, based on this very brief emotional experience. About 2 years ago, I was still in college. I was walking home from dropping my girlfriend off at the train station, and I saw a very peculiar couple. Both the woman, Caucasian, and the man, African American, were dressed in full 50s or 60s attire. I couldn't quite make out what they were saying to each other, but the fractions I caught of their accents were stereotypical of old 60s noir films. At the time, I disregarded it, thinking it was just some theatre couple walking after a show, still in character. Then, in hindsight, came the first sign something was up. They started kissing passionately, but people were walking by them as if they weren't even there, straight up walking toward them or around them mere inches apart, leaving no room for comfort from two people who were making out directly beside them. From personal experience, people either divert their gaze from couples engaging in PDA or stare at them, and they definitely give them space. I realised I was staring, so I looked away and passed them. As I was crossing, I heard a loud swear. Someone shouting, "Get away from her," N-word. Shortly after, I heard a gunshot, screaming, and a car veering as if it were crashing. Terrified, I sprinted across the street and looked behind me, expecting to see the worst. Instead, there was nothing, just a regular crowd of people walking by. No car wreck, no murder scene, no couple, absolutely nothing. My heart was pounding and people were staring at me as if I was a freak. I knew I wasn't crazy since I had many experiences with the paranormal in this, one of the oldest cities in America. Especially since the part of campus my apartment was located next to a very old cemetery and built on the site of several former mental asylums. I tried tracking down information about murders on my college campus, and I came across a website that tracked police records of violent crimes, with a database dating back to the early 1900s. Sure enough, there were several racially motivated hate crimes on that very street in the 50s. There was not much information other than the type of crime. The entries simply said murder or included a sentence detailing it, such as racially motivated or hate crime. Very few had some names associated with them. Unfortunately, I couldn't narrow it down anymore.